the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
As the game went on, which we saw how that went a year ago, just kind of very one-dimensional that I just don't think you can beat this iteration of Kirby's Bulldogs with, is just that kind of one-dimensional run-first type of offense. I think you keep running into a wall in that way, and just makes it that much harder. That was my strong takeaway from what I saw against Georgia and Auburn. But this is your team. You've got a better field, Matt Green. What did you see against the Auburn Tigers?
I would agree with you. And they showed the last four quarterbacks to beat Georgia dating back to 2020. And it was Mac Jones, going all the way back to Joe Burrow, Kyle Trask, Bryce Young. Not only were all those guys Heisman finalists, or a couple won the Heisman, but all of them had 400 yards and 4 touchdowns in those games too. And yeah, not even including CJ Stroud, who had a similar performance. Peyton Thorne didn't do anything in the passing game. So the fact that they were just running the ball with no real threat of the pass game, it's that was probably what worried you the most. I don't know how many other teams on Georgia's schedule kind of run this type of offense. Maybe they'll do something like it if it gives Georgia so many problems. But I feel like it seemed like at one point Auburn made the decision, and we were kind of sitting at home if they're not going to pass, Robbie Ashford is way better for this system. And he was in for a drive or so, but I guess Peyton Thorne gives you the threat of the pass, but they didn't really do anything in the passing game. So for them to just continue to have these little runs and get to the outside, or Thorne just scramble, I've never seen Peyton Thorne. Granted, I haven't watched all of Peyton Thorne's games, right? But I've never seen Peyton Thorne have that sort of rushing production. So I think that was definitely frustrating as a Georgia fan. But I think when we talk about Georgia, it's we do have to acknowledge that we're just talking about them at a different standard, right? It's if we go back to 2021, I remember a certain quarterback whose Heisman moment was beating a 6-6 Auburn team in Jordan-Hare Stadium. And that was a game that what they score 14 points in regulation, and Bryce Young, is a gutty win and all that. Obviously I'm not comparing Carson Beck to Bryce Young, but this is Carson Beck's first road start of his career. We all know about Jordan-Hare Stadium. And also when you get somebody, I think is very important too. This early in the season, everyone's still got their hopes and dreams of what their season could be. And the crowd is pumped. The players are pumped. Auburn could win the SEC West at this point, right? Going into this Georgia game with one loss on the season. So Jordan-Hare Stadium is one of the loudest environments in college football. And I think for Georgia to go on the road, it wasn't pretty by any means. And if you're talking about where we rank Georgia as among the best teams in college football, then yeah, there's some concerns. But I think this was one of the two biggest tests, I think, when we looked at Georgia's schedule preseason. It's Hugh Freeze. It's all at Auburn on the road, being Carson Beck's first road start. This was a tricky positioned game when you've played a bunch of cupcakes. This is the first real opponent. No disrespect to South Carolina. Obviously it's a good, a legitimate opponent, but it was at home. This is definitely the first real challenge. And you saw Georgia was, got off to another slow start, but they were still able to get it done on the road. I think you still have to call it a good win, right?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. It seems like a lot of the takeaways from Georgia folks and analysts and what have you looked at this as a championship just flex from Georgia, that this was a huge win for them, that a lot of teams probably would have gone down playing the way they did for 3 quarters, but that this says a lot about Georgia's resolve and the makeup of this team, and why fans should still not panic about just kind of being in some close counters with South Carolina and Auburn. Do you share that sentiment, or do you think it's a little overblown that Georgia was able to kind of withstand some heavy blows from Auburn in the first half and just be able to get on the other side of that and lock things down, find Brock Bowers over and over again, the defense tightening up? Was that your takeaway, or did you come away, it's good to get away from a win, an SEC win as an SEC win, but let's not overthink Georgia in this regard and give them too much credit for surviving against an Auburn team that still might go 7-5, 6-6, depending on how the rest of the season goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that stuff can kind of be overblown, and and if Georgia does win the national championship, like, yeah, in retrospect, you can go back and be like, that was a character building win, or championship teams win those games or something. Like, yeah, maybe there's an element to that when you're Georgia now, you're number one team in the country every week. It's the biggest game of the season for anyone that's hosting the number one team in the country, right? So you're going to get everybody's best shot. Auburn's obviously a huge rivalry to begin with. So like these teams have a lot of familiarity. Hugh Freeze is a really good offensive mind. Like we just know that, you know, he's going to have some wrinkles that teams aren't ready for. But I mean, I think the way the game played out, I think it feels like it was like correctable things like that Kent State game a year ago, not comparing Auburn to Kent State, but they had just a couple of just uncharacteristic things happen, like losing outside containment and guys just breaking long runs. Like, I feel like that's what you saw a lot in the first half, Georgia not being able to set the edge. And so it felt like in the second half, like Javon Bullard, I think in the running game, like I feel like he made a huge difference just coming up from the safety position. Like that dude just has a nose for the ball. But I mean, this team it's not 2021 or 2022. Like Trayvon Walker and Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter and Devontae Wyatt aren't on this team. So I think Georgia's still really good, but